Please, help me. He's coming back for my little girl." The scream tore through the rain before Isabella Russo even realized she had slammed both palms against the window of the black SUV idling beneath a broken street lamp. Rain soaked her brown cardigan, plastered dark curls against her cheeks, and ran over the terrified face of the 3-year-old girl, trembling in her arms. Isabella was 32, curvy, exhausted, and down to $27 after losing her diner job that afternoon. But none of that mattered now. She had been running for 6 blocks through the wet streets of Chicago with little Sophie clinging to her neck, and the headlights turning onto the street behind them told her she had run out of time. "Please," Isabella gasped, staring through the tinted glass. "I don't care who you are. Just don't let him take her." The driver started to open his door, but a quiet voice from the back stopped him. "Wait." The rear window lowered. Isabella froze. The man inside looked nothing like salvation. His black shirt was open at the collar, expensive watch catching the amber streetlight, and dark eyes studied her with the unnerving calm of someone who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. A tattoo disappeared beneath his rolled sleeve. His name was Dante Moretti, and across Chicago's criminal underworld, men lowered their voices before saying it. At 39, Dante was the wealthy, feared mafia boss of the Moretti organization, a man whose enemies called him merciless, and whose allies knew better than to mistake silence for weakness. Betrayal had buried the warmer parts of him years ago, leaving behind a man who trusted information, leverage, and almost nothing else. Isabella knew none of that. She only saw a stranger in a luxury SUV while footsteps splashed somewhere behind her. "Why should I help you?" Dante asked. Isabella tightened both arms around Sophie. Fear flashed across her face, but she did not beg for herself. "Because she's 3. Dante's gaze shifted to the child. Sophie had stopped crying. She was staring at him through wet eyelashes while clutching a tiny stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. Then a male voice shouted from half a block away, "Isabella!" Her entire body stiffened. Dante noticed. More importantly, he noticed the fading bruise circling her wrist where her sleeve had slipped back. His expression changed by less than an inch, but the driver immediately looked toward the rearview mirror. "Get in," Dante said. Isabella hesitated. "I don't know you." "That makes 2 of us." Another figure appeared beneath the streetlight behind her. Isabella stepped backward, shielding Sophie with her body instead of using the child as a shield. That was when Dante truly looked at her. Not at her soaked clothes. Not at the full-figure, cruel co-workers had mocked earlier that day when the diner manager fired her and told her she was too much trouble. He saw a frightened woman placing herself between danger and a child even when her knees were shaking. Dante opened the door himself. "You have 5 seconds to decide whether you trust the man chasing you," he said quietly, "or the stranger giving you a choice." Isabella looked behind her. The approaching man broke into a run. She climbed inside. Dante pulled the door shut just as a hand struck the glass. Sophie buried her face against Isabella's chest. "Drive," Dante ordered. But Isabella suddenly grabbed his arm. "No!" The driver reached beneath his jacket, but Dante raised one finger and stopped him. Isabella stared through the rain-streaked rear window, breathing hard. "You don't understand. He isn't the one I'm afraid of." Dante's eyes narrowed. "Then who is?" Isabella slowly looked down at Sophie. The little girl was holding something that had not been in her hands moments earlier, a small black flash drive tied to the stuffed rabbit's torn ear. Isabella's face drained of color. "Her father died 3 days ago," she whispered, "and before he died, he told me that if anyone found this, they would kill us both." For the first time that night, Dante Moretti lost his perfect stillness. He recognized the silver emblem stamped onto the drive. It belonged to someone inside his own organization. And suddenly the desperate, curvy woman who had begged at his car window was no longer a stranger caught in somebody else's nightmare. She was carrying the one secret that could expose a traitor Dante had been hunting for 2 years. He looked at Isabella, then at the frightened child in her arms, and made a decision that would put his empire at risk. "Change of plans," he told the driver. "Nobody takes them anywhere without my permission." Isabella swallowed. "Who are you?" Dante held her gaze as the SUV disappeared into the rain. "Tonight," he said, "I'm the reason the people hunting you are about to become afraid." 23 minutes later, Isabella realized the stranger she had begged for help was far more dangerous than the man she had been running from. The SUV passed through iron gates and climbed a private drive toward a stone mansion overlooking Lake Michigan, where armed security stood beneath white floodlights and cameras followed the vehicle from the moment it entered the property. Isabella pulled Sophie closer. "Where are you taking us?" she asked. Dante Moretti sat across from her, perfectly composed, though his attention kept returning to the black flash drive in Sophie's tiny hand. "Somewhere nobody can reach you tonight." "That isn't an answer." Dante looked at her, and something almost like approval flickered in his eyes. Most people became agreeable when they learned his name. Isabella had become more suspicious. The SUV stopped beneath a covered entrance. A tall man in a charcoal suit hurried down the steps. "Mr. Moretti, we weren't expecting." He noticed Isabella and stopped. His eyes moved from her soaked cardigan to Sophie's muddy sneakers, and the judgment in his expression was immediate. "Sir, should I have security take them to the service building?" Dante stepped from the SUV. "Her name is Isabella." The man blinked. "Of course, I only meant—" "Then use it." Silence fell across the entrance. Isabella stared at Dante. He did not smile or wait for gratitude. He simply removed his coat, placed it around her wet shoulders, then turned toward the house. "Sophie needs something warm." Isabella stiffened. "How do you know her name?" Dante stopped. Isabella realized she had never told him. He glanced toward the little girl, who was still holding the stuffed rabbit. "It's embroidered on the ear." For some reason, that small observation unsettled Isabella more than the armed guards. Inside, the mansion was warm and almost unnaturally quiet. Isabella expected marble halls filled with frightening men. Instead, Dante led them into a private kitchen where he personally turned on a lamp instead of the harsh ceiling lights. Sophie finally loosened her grip around Isabella's neck. "Hot chocolate?" Dante asked her. Sophie nodded cautiously. Isabella watched him take a mug from a cabinet. "Mafia bosses make hot chocolate?" she asked before she could stop herself. Dante's hand paused. "So you figured it out?" The guards helped. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved, observant, terrified. Those aren't mutually exclusive. His softness vanished when his security chief, Marcus Vale, entered carrying a tablet. "We identified the man who chased them, Eric Dalton, former private security. He was paid $5,000 tonight to retrieve the child and anything she was carrying." Isabella went pale. "Paid by whom?" Marcus glanced at Dante. "The payment originated through one of our accounts." Dante became completely still. Isabella immediately stood. "We're leaving." "No. You just said your people are involved, which is precisely why you're safer where I can see you." Isabella stepped between Dante and Sophie. "Powerful men keep saying they know what's safest for me. I'm done believing them." The kitchen went silent. Marcus looked almost offended that anyone had spoken to Dante Moretti that way. Dante, however, studied Isabella for several seconds before moving aside from the doorway. "Then choose." Isabella frowned. "What?" "That door is unlocked. If you want to leave, my driver will take you anywhere you ask. I won't stop you." She searched his face for the trap. There wasn't one. Then Sophie suddenly climbed down from her chair and walked toward Dante. She held up the stuffed rabbit. "Can you fix him?" Dante stared at the dangling ear. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for Isabella to notice something wounded pass behind his eyes. He crouched until he was level with the child. I can try. While Dante examined the torn stitching, Isabella saw something no rumor about a mafia boss could have explained. His hands, capable of commanding an empire, were impossibly careful around a child's broken toy. Then Sophie pulled the flash drive free and placed it in his palm. "Daddy said give this to the man with the lion ring." Dante froze. Isabella looked down. On his right hand was a heavy silver ring engraved with a lion. "Sophie," Isabella whispered, "what did you say?" Dante slowly rose. "Your father knew me?" Sophie shook her head. "Daddy had your picture." Marcus immediately connected the drive to an isolated laptop. A folder appeared containing financial records, photographs, and surveillance files. Then one photograph filled the screen. Isabella's breath caught. It showed Sophie's father meeting secretly with Marcus Vale. Dante's gaze lifted from the screen to the security chief standing 10 feet away. Marcus reached inside his jacket. Dante moved first. He pulled Isabella and Sophie behind him as 2 guards rushed into the kitchen. "Hands where I can see them, Marcus." But Marcus smiled. "You still don't understand, Dante." He slowly raised his empty hands. "That drive isn't evidence against me." His eyes shifted toward Isabella. "It's evidence against her." Isabella went rigid. Dante turned toward the screen as another file opened automatically. Her photograph appeared beside a transfer of $250,000, and underneath it were 3 words that made the entire room fall silent. "Isabella Russo, confirmed asset." "Confirmed asset?" Isabella whispered, staring at her own photograph on Danny's laptop as if she were looking at a stranger. "I don't even know what that means." Marcus Vale gave a humorless smile. "It means you've been lying since the moment you knocked on his window." Isabella instinctively pulled Sophie against her side. Dante remained between them and Marcus, one arm slightly extended behind him, a silent barrier that told Isabella he had not decided she was guilty. "Not yet." "Explain the transfer," Dante said. His voice was quiet, which somehow made every guard in the kitchen stand straighter. Marcus tapped the screen. $250,000 transferred 6 weeks ago from a shell company connected to the Bellucci family. Recipient, Isabella Russo. Isabella shook her head. "I've never seen that money." "Convenient." "Marcus." Dante said his name once. The security chief stopped talking. Dante turned toward Isabella. "Bank?" "First Lakeshore Credit Union." "Account ending?" She hesitated, then gave him 4 numbers. Marcus checked. His expression shifted. "Different account." Isabella stared at him. "Because that isn't mine." Dante's eyes hardened. "Someone opened an account in her name." Marcus started to object, but Dante cut him off. "And someone wanted us to find it." He looked again at the screen. The evidence was too clean. Isabella's photograph, her address, a transfer large enough to make her look purchased, all conveniently stored on the same drive Sophie's father had ordered delivered to Dante. It did not prove Isabella was innocent, but it smelled like a trap. Dante closed the laptop. "Lock down the estate. Nobody enters or leaves until I know who built this file." "Including her?" Marcus asked. Dante's gaze turned cold. "Especially anyone who thinks she's an easy target." Isabella heard the distinction. So did Marcus. An hour later, Sophie was asleep beneath a blanket on a sofa in Dante's private library, her repaired rabbit tucked beneath her chin. Rain traced silver lines down the tall windows. Isabella stood near the fireplace, wearing Dante's coat over her damp clothes, refusing the guest room she had been offered. Dante entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and placed one beside her. "2 sugars," he said. Isabella looked at it. "How did you know?" "You put 2 packets in the coffee you abandoned in my kitchen." She almost smiled, then remembered where she was. "You notice everything. It keeps me alive. Is that why you don't trust anyone?" The question landed harder than she intended. Dante looked towards Sophie instead of answering. Isabella lowered her voice. "Her father was Daniel Mercer. He lived across the hall from me. 3 nights ago he knocked on my door bleeding and asked me to take Sophie." Dante's attention sharpened. You weren't her mother? No. Isabella looked at the sleeping child. Her mother died when she was a baby. Daniel knew I watched Sophie when he worked nights. He gave me the rabbit and told me to keep her safe. Then he disappeared. And you took responsibility for a 3-year-old while unemployed? Isabella's cheeks tightened. I was fired today because 2 men came into the diner asking questions about me. My manager said customers didn't need my drama. Before that, he'd spent months making jokes about my size whenever I carried dessert trays. She looked directly at Dante. I survived the jokes. Sophie might not survive the men. Something dangerous settled into Dante's expression, but his voice remained gentle. No one in this house will speak to you that way. Before Isabella could answer, every light in the library went out. Sophie woke screaming. Dante crossed the room instantly, pulling Isabella and the child behind the stone fireplace as emergency lights flashed red. Gunfire did not follow. Instead, Dante's phone vibrated. A photograph appeared on the screen, taken through the library window less than a minute earlier. It showed Dante standing beside Isabella while Sophie slept. Beneath it was a message. Give us the woman and child before 2 a.m., or Moretti learns what they cost him. Isabella looked at the clock. 12:47 a.m. They know we're here. Dante was already calling security when Isabella noticed something in the photograph. Wait! She enlarged the reflection in the window. A man stood behind the photographer, barely visible beneath an umbrella. Isabella's hand began trembling. I know him. Dante looked at her. Who? Her eyes filled with disbelief. That's Daniel. Dante stared at the image. Sophie's father? Isabella nodded slowly. The man everyone told me was dead. Then Dante's phone rang from a blocked number. He answered without speaking. A familiar male voice came through the speaker. You have 73 minutes, Moretti, and if Isabella tells you what she knows, neither of you will survive until sunrise. Put Daniel on speaker, Isabella said, and Dante saw something change in her face. The fear was still there, but beneath it was anger. He placed the phone on the library table as the emergency lights washed the room in red. Daniel, Isabella said, keeping one hand on Sophie's shoulder, you gave me your daughter. You told me men were coming. You let me believe you were dead. For several seconds, only static answered. Then Daniel Mercer laughed softly. I needed someone they wouldn't suspect. Isabella flinched as though he had struck her. You used me. I trusted you. No, you used me because you knew I wouldn't abandon Sophie. Dante's jaw tightened. That distinction mattered to him. Daniel had not chosen Isabella because she was weak. He had chosen her because her kindness was predictable, and he had weaponized it. What do you want? Dante asked. Daniel's voice hardened. The drive at the old freight terminal on South Morgan. Before 2. Bring Isabella. No police, no army. And Sophie? Keep her out of this. Isabella stared at the phone in disbelief. She was already in this when you tied evidence to her toy. Daniel disconnected. Dante checked the clock. 12:56 a.m., 64 minutes. You're not going, he said. Yes, I am. That wasn't a request. Isabella stepped directly in front of him. And I'm not one of your soldiers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Dante did something that surprised every guard in the room. He nodded. You're right. Isabella blinked. But if you go, he continued, you go because you choose to, and you stay beside me. Before she could answer, Marcus entered carrying a recovered security tablet. We found how they accessed the cameras. Someone inside the estate gave them a temporary encryption key. Dante's eyes turned lethal. Who? Marcus placed the tablet down. The authorization came from your uncle, Vincent Moretti. Silence swallowed the room. Vincent had helped raise Dante after his father's death. He had sat beside him through funerals, wars, and every major decision for 15 years. Dante showed almost nothing, but Isabella noticed his hand close slowly around the back of a chair. Betrayal had found the exact wound he kept hidden. There's more, Marcus said. Daniel wasn't working for the Belluccis. He was investigating Vincent. He opened another file from the flash drive. Records filled the screen. Stolen money, secret payments, surveillance photographs, names of men Vincent had quietly purchased inside the Moretti organization. Then Isabella's fabricated bank account appeared. Vincent framed her, Marcus said. If the drive reached us, Isabella would look like the informant. We would eliminate the witness for him. Isabella went pale. Dante looked at her, and she understood immediately. I was supposed to die inside your house. Dante's expression became frighteningly calm. Yes. He moved closer, but stopped before touching her. And you won't. Isabella's composure finally cracked. I lost my apartment because Daniel disappeared. I lost my job because men followed me there. People looked at me like I was trouble before any of this happened. I kept thinking if I stayed quiet, if I took up less space, maybe nobody else would get hurt. Dante removed his coat from her shoulders only long enough to settle it around her more securely. Look at me. She did. You carried a child 6 blocks through a storm while armed men hunted you. You walked into a stranger's car because she needed you. Nothing about you needs to become smaller. Isabella's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. Dante did not wipe them away or pull her into an embrace she had not asked for. He simply stayed close enough that she no longer stood alone. Then Sophie, sitting silently on the sofa, spoke. Bella? Isabella turned. The little girl was pulling at the stuffed rabbit's repaired ear. Something metallic slipped from inside the stuffing and landed on the floor. Dante picked it up, a tiny memory card. Marcus inserted it into the isolated laptop. A video appeared. Daniel sat in a dim room, staring directly into the camera. If Isabella found this, then my first plan failed. Isabella, I'm sorry. The flash drive was bait. This card is the real evidence. He held up a document bearing Vincent Moretti's signature. Vincent ordered the murder of Dante's younger brother 7 years ago. Dante stopped breathing. And there's one more thing. Vincent knows Isabella has the card now. He won't wait until 2. At that exact moment, an explosion shook the front gates. Glass rattled throughout the mansion. Guards shouted from the hallway. Dante immediately stepped in front of Isabella and Sophie. His phone lit up with a security alert. Perimeter breached. Then a second message appeared from Vincent. You have something that belongs to me. Dante looked toward Isabella. She tightened her arms around Sophie, but instead of hiding, she met his eyes. Tell me what to do. Dante reached for her hand. Stay with me. Outside, headlights began climbing the private drive. Kill the exterior lights, Dante ordered. The Moretti mansion vanished into darkness as 3 black vehicles climbed the rain-soaked drive, their headlights sweeping across the stone walls. 1:18 a.m. glowed on the security monitor. 42 minutes remained before Vincent's original deadline, but Daniel's warning had been right. Vincent had changed the rules. Dante moved Isabella and Sophie toward a reinforced passage behind the library while Marcus coordinated the guards. This leads to the underground garage, Dante told Isabella. My men will take you and Sophie to the lake house. Isabella didn't move. And you? I stay. Then we stay. Dante's eyes hardened. Isabella, Vincent framed me because he thinks I'm disposable. Daniel used me because he knew I'd protect Sophie. Everyone keeps deciding what I am useful for without asking me. She removed the memory card from the laptop and closed her fist around it. This ends with my choice. Dante stared at her, and for once the Mafia boss had no command ready. Then Sophie whispered, Bella, I'm scared. Isabella immediately crouched and held the little girl. I know, sweetheart, that's why you're going somewhere safe. She looked at Marcus. Take her. Sophie clung to her. Isabella kissed her forehead. Remember what I told you? Brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you know who to trust when you are. Sophie looked toward Dante. I trust him. The words hit Dante harder than any threat that night. He crouched, placed the repaired rabbit in Sophie's hands, and said, "Then trust me to bring Bella back." Marcus disappeared with Sophie through the passage. Seconds later, the front doors opened. Vincent Moretti entered beneath the chandelier with 6 armed men behind him. He was silver-haired, elegant, and smiling like an uncle arriving late to dinner. "Dante," he said, "all this over a waitress?" Isabella's shoulders tightened. Dante stepped beside her, not in front of her this time. "Her name is Isabella Russo." Vincent laughed. "You would risk everything your father built for her?" "No." Dante's gaze went cold. "You risked it when you murdered my brother." Vincent's smile disappeared. Isabella held up the memory card. "We have your signature." Vincent looked at her as though she were dirt on an expensive shoe. "Do you really believe these men will follow him after he chooses someone like you over his own blood?" Isabella's old shame rose instinctively. The diner jokes, strangers' looks, years of learning to make herself smaller before someone else could tell her she took up too much room. But this time she did not lower her eyes. "You're right about one thing," she said. "People have underestimated me my whole life." She stepped forward. "That's why none of you noticed when I made a copy." Vincent froze. Dante turned toward her. Isabella pulled Dante's phone from her cardigan pocket. Earlier, while Marcus had been preparing the evacuation, she had uploaded Daniel's video and Vincent's documents to the secure server Marcus showed her. A progress bar filled the screen. 96%. Vincent lunged forward. "Stop that upload!" His men raised their weapons, but Dante's guards emerged from both balconies above. "Nobody moves," Dante said. The room locked into a deadly silence. 98%, 99%. Then a gunshot shattered the chandelier. Isabella flinched as Dante pulled her down behind a marble column. Another shot struck the wall. Vincent's men scattered, but Dante's guards quickly overwhelmed them. Isabella looked at the phone. The upload had stalled at 99%. No. She tapped the screen. No signal. Vincent had activated a jammer. Then Isabella remembered the isolated laptop in the library. "The laptop!" she shouted. "It has a wired connection." Dante caught her wrist. "Too dangerous. That evidence protects Sophie too." She looked straight into his eyes. "You said I get to choose." Dante released her. "Then we go together." They moved through the side corridor as alarms screamed overhead. At the library door, Vincent suddenly appeared behind them. He raised a handgun toward Isabella. Dante turned, but Vincent fired first. Dante jerked backward and hit the wall. "Dante!" Isabella caught him before he fell. Blood spread across the upper sleeve of his black shirt. Vincent approached, breathing hard. "Give me the card." Isabella stood between him and the wounded Mafia boss. Her hands shook, but she did not move aside. "No." Vincent lifted the weapon. Behind Isabella, Dante tried to rise. "Isabella, move." She didn't. Instead, she reached backward and pressed the memory card into the laptop. The screen flashed. Upload resumed. Vincent's face twisted. "You stupid woman." Isabella met his eyes. "No, just the woman you should never have underestimated." The progress bar reached 100%. Every phone in the mansion began vibrating as the evidence transmitted to Dante's captains and attorney. Vincent stared at the screen in horror. Then another voice came from the doorway. "Drop the gun, Vincent." Daniel Mercer stood there alive, soaked from the rain, and pointing his weapon directly at the man who had destroyed Dante's family. "Drop it, Vincent." Daniel Mercer stood in the library doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his weapon steady while Vincent slowly turned. For one dangerous second, nobody moved. Dante was against the wall, one hand pressed to the wound high on his arm, while Isabella remained between him and Vincent. "You should be dead," Vincent said. "That was the idea," Daniel replied. "I needed you to believe you'd won." Vincent's eyes shifted toward the laptop. "Upload complete" still glowed across the screen. His shoulders sank. The evidence had already reached Dante's captain's attorney and every man whose loyalty Vincent had secretly tried to buy. There was nothing left to destroy. Marcus and 2 guards rushed into the room moments later and disarmed Vincent without another shot. As they dragged him toward the hallway, Vincent looked back at Dante. "You're throwing away blood for her." Dante pushed himself upright despite the pain. "No, you taught me blood means nothing without loyalty." Then his eyes moved to Isabella. "She taught me what loyalty actually looks like." Vincent was taken away, and suddenly Isabella's courage broke beneath the weight of everything she had survived. She turned toward Dante and saw the blood on his sleeve. "You're hurt. It went through my shoulder." "That is still being shot, Dante." Her voice cracked. He almost smiled. "I've had worse." "I haven't." That stopped him. Isabella's hands trembled as she touched the fabric near his wound, afraid of hurting him. Dante gently covered her hand with his. "I'm here." 20 minutes later, a doctor was treating Dante while Isabella waited beside Sophie in the sitting room. Daniel entered slowly. Sophie stared at him, then ran into his arms. He dropped to his knees and held his daughter tightly. Isabella turned away, overwhelmed by relief, but Daniel called her name. "Isabella." She faced him. "I owe you more than an apology." "You owe Sophie the truth," she said. Daniel nodded. "And I'll spend the rest of my life giving it to her." He explained that he had staged his death after discovering Vincent's betrayal, believing disappearing was the only way to keep Sophie alive long enough to get the evidence to Dante. But his plan had placed Isabella directly in danger. "I chose you because I knew you would protect her," he admitted. "I told myself that made it acceptable." Isabella shook her head. "My kindness isn't permission to use me." Daniel lowered his eyes. "You're right." By sunrise, Vincent's network inside the Moretti organization had collapsed. The fabricated account in Isabella's name was exposed, her innocence was documented, and Daniel agreed to cooperate fully with Dante's legal team. Yet when Isabella stepped onto the terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, none of that was what she was thinking about. The storm had passed. Pale gold sunlight touched the water as Dante joined her, his shoulder bandaged beneath a clean white shirt. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." For a while they stood quietly. Then Isabella handed him his coat. "I guess I don't need this anymore." Dante didn't take it. "Keep it." She smiled faintly. "Do all terrified women who hit your car window get expensive coats?" "Only the ones who save my life, expose a traitor, and argue with every instruction I give them." Isabella laughed. A real laugh this time. Dante watched her as if the sound were something he had forgotten existed. Then his expression softened. "Last night you said you spent years trying to take up less space." Isabella looked away. "People make you believe things after hearing them long enough." Dante stepped closer but left enough distance for her to choose the rest. "Then here's something different." She looked at him. "You never needed to become smaller to deserve respect, Isabella, or safety, or love." Tears filled her eyes. This time she didn't hide them. She closed the distance herself and took his hand. 3 months later, Isabella no longer worked at the diner. Not because Dante had bought her a new life, but because she had chosen one. With his backing and her own savings from a settlement connected to the false accusations, she opened a small neighborhood cafe where nobody was mocked for how they looked or how little money they had. Sophie visited every Saturday with Daniel, who was rebuilding his life as a father. And Dante? Chicago still feared Dante Moretti. His enemies still knew exactly what kind of man he could be. But every evening, one particular cafe saw another version of him. The man who sat in the corner waiting for Isabella to finish remembered exactly how she took her coffee and never once asked her to become anything except herself. One rainy night had begun with a desperate woman pounding on the window of a mafia boss's car. It ended with a traitor exposed, a child reunited with her father, a guarded man learning to trust again, and a woman who finally understood that being overlooked had never meant being unworthy. Sometimes the person who appears most dangerous can become the one who makes you feel safest. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates becomes the strongest person in the room. So what would you have done if you were Isabella that night? Gotten into Dante Moretti's car, or kept running through the rain? Tell us in the comments. And subscribe to the channel for more emotional Mafia Boss stories, where danger, loyalty, and unexpected love collide.